When I was growing up, they added a new station to our cable channels, and it was WTBS. And WTBS was known for two things: wrestling, which everybody knew not to call me during wrestling. Not that anybody was calling me at that time, but this is my story. I'll tell it how I want to. And old movies. One of the old movies that they always shown on TBS was the Godzilla movies. Now keep in mind, this is not the modern remakes of Godzilla. This is the old from Japan with the Kung Fu Theater voiceovers. And all of the Godzilla movies had a basic premise. Some kind of booger would come flying in, swimming in, whatever, and tear up half of Tokyo. We'll use Mothra, for example. Mothra comes flying in, and in addition to destroying all their sweaters, also destroys half of Tokyo. So then, the citizens of Tokyo would call up Godzilla, and he would come fight Mothra, and in the process tear up the other half of Tokyo. Well, the book of Revelation depicts a beast similar to Godzilla that comes from the sea, and it was an amalgamation of all these different animals, and it was kind of a chaos dragon, and often used in biblical iconography. If you compare the apocalyptic writing of John in Revelation 13, you compare it with Daniel, we know that these are nations or governments. So governments are depicted as these chaos dragons, as these chaos beasts. Our founding fathers picked up on that, and that's why they created a system of government that limited government, and it was supposed to be a government of the people, by the people. And that's why you got to be careful, even when you're exegeting the Bible, when you're interpreting the Bible and applying it. We don't have a king. We're not supposed to have a king. We're supposed to have public servants. So what does this have to do with Godzilla? Well, this is how governments are. A lot of people in our country are like the people of Tokyo that called up Godzilla, not realizing that it's just going to tear up more than it fixes. Because everything the government does is ham-fisted, and our founding fathers knew that if a government gets too big, it becomes murderous. And that's what we see all throughout history. As a matter of fact, we referenced Daniel earlier. Daniel gets his vision of all these nations as these monsters, basically. And then we see it played out in the narrative that the king has this dream, and he wants all these people to interpret his dream, and he says, if you don't do it, I'm going to kill all of you. So a lot of people are about to die just because a king has a whim. That's what power does. And that's why our founding fathers, because of their biblical worldview, wanted to live in government, because they understood this. We have a picture of this from history that looks just like the Godzilla theme played out. The Jewish people had gone into exile. They were conquered by Babylon. Well, then the Medo-Persians conquered the Babylonians, and then the Grecian Empire conquered the Medo-Persians under Alexander the Great. One of the guys that came up under Alexander the Great was Antiochus Epiphanes, and he was a really bad dude, and he really oppressed the people of God. Whereas, the Medo-Persians kind of had a live and let live attitude. He really, came down on them. He sacrificed a pig on the altar of the temple to desecrate it, and all these other things. So the Jewish people actually rose up and fought back and got their deliverance and got their freedom for a time. Well, during that time where Israel was free again, the Roman Empire conquered the known world, and two of the brothers, the Maccabees, was the family that actually led the revolt against the Grecian government, had a dispute on who should be in charge. So they invited Rome. They called Godzilla. Well, Rome came in, invited, and came in and conquered and took over. So that's how governments operate. So it's the exact premise of Godzilla played out. And in addition to being homicidal and dangerous, governments are also wasteful. For example, say you have a business You have your own business. You do whatever you do. In your business, you have to watch your spending, because if you spend too much, if you spend more than comes in, then you'll go out of business. If your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep will be your downfall, as the old saying says. Well, governments are exactly the opposite of that. Governments, say you're part of a department, a head of a government department, and you need funding. So you get your funding this year, you have an incentive to blow all that money whether you need it all or not. Because if you go before them next year and you need funding and you didn't use all of it or waste all of it the year before, then you're not going to get funding the next year. So it encourages waste. It don't encourage frugalness like the private sector does. And then you multiply that by an ever-expanding government that our founding fathers never envisioned. And that's why there is a movement afoot right now to try to bring it back into check the way it was originally supposed to be. Because that money has to come from somewhere. And it causes increased taxes, increased debt, and all these other things, because you multiply all those agencies that's ever expanding, and you just get more and more spending, and then it's more and more taxation and more inflation and all these other things. And also, if you're in the private sector and you don't do a good job, say you have a hamburger stand down the road and you don't make good hamburgers, you do shoddy work, then people are going to vote with their pocketbook and you're going to go out of business. Government operates just the opposite. The worse they do, the more they vote for their own pay raises, and they just entrench themselves. You say, well, you shouldn't talk about political stuff. Well, the Bible covers everything. And this portrays a mindset that Christian people have, that this is the Bible, this is Sunday morning, and this is real life. Monday morning is different. No, if it don't work on Monday morning, there's no sense in shouting about it on Sunday morning. So the Bible has answers to all these things, and our founding fathers knew this. They had varying degrees of devotion as Christians. Some of them had some funny beliefs, but even the most secular of our founding fathers still had a more biblical worldview than the modern people do, because Western culture is built on a Judeo-Christian foundation. So these are some thoughts. Don't get upset with those of us that understand from both the Bible and history, because see, the book of Revelation, which we referenced earlier, is a panorama of history. A lot of people put all this stuff off. A lot of the things that it's writing about, a lot of the people in the book of Revelation wasn't wondering when tribulation was coming. They were in tribulation. They were being fed to the lions. They were being lit on fire by these tyrannical governments. And so a lot of the things in Revelation is cyclical, and that's why our founding fathers wanted to limit government, because they saw from the biblical record what it could turn into, what a monster it could turn into. So I encourage you, for your problems, don't call up Godzilla, i.e. governments, because he's just going to tear up more than he fixed. Thanks for watching. God bless.